We're doing a bit of a different video today. A bit niche, but I have seen people on TikTok talking about this, so I'm really hoping it's going to find an audience here. Today we are going to be talking about a woman who had classrooms in the 2000s in an absolute chokehold, and that is Miss Jacqueline Wilson. If you don't know who Jacqueline Wilson is, she is a British author who's best known for her children's books, and more specifically how unconventional these children's books are. Jacqueline Wilson's children's books are unconventional in the sense they often deal with really, really heavy subjects you wouldn't normally see in other children's books, such as cheating parents, mental illness, broken homes are a very common one. Let me tell you, for this video I had to go back and reread some of these books as an adult, and I'm not sure how some of it got past the publishers, to be honest. So today I thought I'd share with you guys some of the more traumatizing Jacqueline Wilson novels that I found to be quite appalling growing up, and I hope you really enjoy. I want to clarify that Jacqueline Wilson was by far one of my favourite authors growing up. This video is not intended with any disrespect. If anything, it's fun to look back on how times have changed. Jacqueline Wilson has said herself as well, she often wrote about such heavy themes so her readers wouldn't feel so alone were they in those situations, and I actually think that's really cool. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Vicky Angel is a bit of a fucking wild novel, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes you see it labelled under the teenage section, but not always, and in my opinion, children under 13 really shouldn't be reading it. A very common trope Jacqueline Wilson employs in her books is to have a set of best friends, and the narrator will usually be kind of the shy, nerdy best friend, and then the other best friend will be like super cool, really popular, and the only reason they're kind of still friends is because they've been friends since childhood, basically. Vicky Angel is very much this kind of story. The main character is Jade, who is quite mousy and shy, and then there is the boisterous, larger-than-life Vicky, and they're described as being about 14-ish. The book starts off with them signing up for some after-school clubs that have been posted on a school notice board, and Vicky wants to join the running club while Jade wants to join the drama club, and Vicky starts making fun of her heavily for it. Jade gets really ratty at Vicky for making fun of her and finally stands up for herself. It's kind of implied this is the first time she has ever stood up for herself in their years of friendship, and she storms out of the school. Vicky goes running after her and is running laps around her trying to cheer her up, and unfortunately runs out into the road and is struck by a car, and unfortunately, later on at the hospital, she passes away. When Jade learns the news, in a state of shock and grief, she runs straight back to the school, to the site where Vicky died, and she is greeted by Vicky as a ghost. Jade is the only person who can see Vicky's ghost throughout the course of the novel, and this forms the novel's main plot. Jade is relieved to have her friend back at first, but Vicky's spirit quickly becomes quite verbally abusive towards her and very manipulative. She prevents Jade from moving on with her life at all. She's a massive distraction no matter where Jade goes, and whenever Jade finds herself getting closer to new people, Vicky kind of encourages her to push them away. The reason I chose this book for this list is because while a lot of Jacqueline Wilson books have darker elements in them, the darkest scene in this story by far is when Vicky encourages Jade to skip school and go to London for the day, but while they're on the train, Vicky tries encouraging Jade to jump out and so that they will always be able to be together. Like, this is supposed to be a children's book. As the novel progresses, Jade actually starts going to bereavement counselling and she starts learning how to control Vicky's ghost. And at Vicky's inquest, Jade becomes so overwhelmed with guilt she actually runs back to the crash site again, where she is nearly hit by a car herself, but she's actually saved by Vicky's ghost this time. Vicky's ghost ends up comforting Jade and telling her the accident wasn't her fault so that her guilt is absolved, and then Vicky grows little angel wings and she flies up to the sky. Jacqueline Wilson herself has said that she gets asked all the time if Vicky's ghost is supposed to be real or a figment of Jade's imagination, and she said it's up to the reader to kind of figure that out for themselves. As an adult, I definitely prefer that she's like a manifestation of Jade's guilt, but as a kid I remember really hoping that she was actually real. Nonetheless, it's a pretty harrowing depiction of grief. Dustbin Baby is one of Jacqueline Wilson's books that is specifically targeted at teenagers, and it follows the story of April, who is 14 on the day of the novel's events. April was found on April Fool's Day 14 years before the novel's events in a dustbin, abandoned with no trace of her mother's contact details, and proceeded to be bounced from foster home to foster home her whole life. The novel starts the morning of her birthday, where she has an argument with her adoptive mother and storms off out of the house, going to visit all the homes she grew up in for closure. First, she goes to her first foster home, who was owned by a woman named Pat, but Pat doesn't really seem to remember April, and April has no recollection of her time at the home either. April was actually adopted by the parents of her second home and was an only child, but her new parents had a very dysfunctional relationship, with the father cheating on the mother continuously, and eventually he leaves them, and the mother is so depressed and debilitated that April, at 5, is kind of left to just take care of herself. Her mother eventually takes her own life in the bath. April is the one who finds her, and her father doesn't take her into his new home and hands her back to social services. It genuinely breaks my heart to think of anyone who might have gone through issues similar to this in real life. I'm sure it has happened, and like, to think of that is just unfathomable. April is then sent to another foster home ran by a couple which houses quite a lot of foster children, and she gets on okay there for a while, but then another little girl gets fostered there named Pearl, and she is just a fucking psycho, to be honest with you. Pearl manages to convince all the adults in their school and at home that she and April are absolutely best friends, but when they're not around, she bites her, verbally abuses her, taunts her, just bullies her in any way you can think of. Pearl and April are made take baths together in the foster home, and when the adults are out of the room, Pearl likes to play a game called Mermaids, in which she just shoves April's head under the water repeatedly until she passes out. It's very common for the protagonists of Jacqueline Wilson's novels to be very kind of like creative and imaginative, and also like interests that are quite young for their age as well. And April likes playing with paper dolls. One day, April returns to her room to see Pearl has cut up and destroyed all of her paper dolls, and this results in a chase where April actually ends up pushing Pearl down the stairs and seriously injuring her. As nobody knew how Pearl was actually treating April, April is deemed to have behavioural issues and is sent to a very specific care home that can cater to this. The name of this behavioural care home is Sunnybank, and April, while still very young, has a group of teenagers take a real shine to how cute and small she is, and she ends up befriending them. After dark, this group of girls like to burgle houses, and they start using April to break into the houses first, as she is so little, so she can let them in easier. This operation eventually gets uncovered, and that's why she is removed from the home. The ringleader of that group of girls had been called Gina, and when April comes to Sunnybank, she looks specifically for Gina and ends up being redirected to her apartment, and she sees Gina has completely turned her life around and now gives behavioural conferences at children's homes. After Sunnybank, April ends up at a boarding school where she really bonds with her history teacher Marion, who ends up becoming her current adoptive mother from the start of the novel. We don't see April visit this boarding school, but towards the end of the novel she does eventually make her way to the alleyway where she was initially found as a baby, and actually ends up finding a number scribbled on one of the wheelie bins outside. She calls the number hoping it's her mother, but it's actually not her mother, it's Frankie, the man who had initially found her as a baby, and he tells her that while her mother had never actually been tracked down, he's really glad she got in touch and hopes the two can meet up. While April still hasn't found her mother by the end of the novel, there is somewhat of a sense of closure, and it is quite a sweet story the way it ties together in the end, but like the fact she just couldn't catch a break throughout the course of her childhood makes this novel so unbelievably sad. This is the big one. This is the one that gets brought up whenever anybody goes on about how traumatizing Jacqueline Wilson's novels were. Honestly, it's also probably my favourite Jacqueline Wilson novel. My Sister Jodie is narrated by 10-year-old Pearl and centres heavily around her 14-year-old sister Jodie, and Pearl loves Jodie more than anything. The sisters are enrolled in a new boarding school when their parents get jobs there as the cook and the caretaker, and it's a very large, odd Gothic building with a large tower attached. And Pearl is absolutely thrilled for the new start, but Jodie is absolutely not and is very resentful towards her parents for making her go. In their hometown, Jodie was part of a very tough group of girls and was one of the most popular girls in school, while Pearl was subject to bullying at her primary school. And in this new school, it's kind of the opposite, and Jodie's life is completely miserable. Everyone in her year is absolutely horrible to her, and she also faces just like endless criticism from the girl's mother. Like, I don't think the two have a single positive interaction throughout the story. Jodie starts a relationship with Jed, the school's gardener, who is 19, and she ends up ending their relationship later on in the novel when he runs over a baby badger with a ride-on lawnmower in a section that's pretty hard to read through. The girls and their parents, due to their parents working at the school, actually have an apartment that's kind of in the school's basement, and Pearl ends up finding a pregnancy test in their bathroom, and Jodie ends up insisting that it's not hers. Something that's also very difficult to get through when it comes to this novel is Jodie is genuinely very like boisterous and fun-loving and just a wild card at the start of the novel, and just with the bullying and just the constant misery that comes into her life, you really do start to see the character change throughout the novel, and she starts isolating herself and just, yeah, it's just really difficult. There's a little bit of a hope for Jodie when she gets a task to read the infant students some bedtime stories each night and help get them ready for bed, and she does really well at this for a while. But after Halloween, she tells them a ghost story that gives them really, really bad nightmares, and not only does she end up losing that job, but she gets in a lot of trouble as well. The job of getting the infant students ready for bed and reading to them is then offered to Pearl, who does take it despite the guilt she feels over betraying Jodie. Jodie then has to stand up in front of the school assembly and say that ghosts aren't real, which makes her an even bigger target for bullies. The novel's climax occurs during Guy Fawkes Night when Jodie dresses head to toe in white as a ghost and makes her way up the school's tallest tower and waves at everybody down on the ground below. When she kind of tries to wave out the window to reveal that it's just her and not a ghost, she is wearing high heels and trips out the window, falling to the ground and breaking her neck. There's a lot of speculation in the media following Jodie's death, wondering if it was self-inflicted. Pearl insists it's not, and the family move to London to start a new life. Their mother has a baby some months later, revealing the pregnancy test in the bathroom was actually hers and not Jodie's. It turns out Pearl's narration of the story is actually her writing it all down for their baby sister to read someday so that she can learn about Jodie, which is obviously really bittersweet. You just had to be there when this book came out. Like, I remember how shocked everybody was by the ending. I was originally just going to like lump Girls Under Pressure and Girls in Tears into the one entry, but then I remembered the plot from Girls in Love involving Nadine, and I was like, I might as well just do the whole series. The Girls series is a 4-part novel series for teenagers which revolves around the protagonist Ellie, a chubby girl who is into art, her best friend since childhood Nadine, who's a goth, and their friend who joined up with them in secondary school, Magda, who is very into boys and really into fashion and just a stereotypical girly girl. Aside from the subplot involving Dean in this book, it's mostly still a lighthearted and fun book. But it does start with the three of them starting year 9, and they're all 13 at the start of the novel series. On the first day back in year 9, Nadine reveals she has started going out with a 17-year-old boy over the summer holidays named Liam. In a fit of jealousy, Ellie reveals that she too has gotten a boyfriend over the summer holidays, a 15-year-old named Dan who is extremely good looking. While Ellie did meet a boy named Dan while on holidays, his crush on her isn't reciprocated. He is 12 and he is very stereotypically late 90s nerdy. Not wanting to feel left out, Magda asks out Greg, a year 10 in the boys' school across from theirs, and they start dating as well. The girls grow concerned as Nadine's mental health seems to decline, and she reveals Liam is putting quite a lot of pressure on her to go quite far with him physically. One night, Nadine reveals she and Liam have plans to go to a nightclub, and Ellie and Magda decide to follow them, and it's heavily implied that Liam gave Nadine drugs. It's implied to be MDMA. They bring Nadine into the bathrooms to try and refresh her, and while she's in the cubicle, a group of girls come in who ask if their friend is the girl who's been dancing with Liam and reveal he is a huge creep, has a really bad reputation, and it's a well-known fact he likes to date virgins because he can't catch anything off of them. Pretty grim. Nadine overhears this and ends up breaking up with Liam, though she is extremely depressed afterwards. Ellie ends up going out with the real Dan at the end of the novel, which is oddly cute, and Magda breaks up with Greg as she just feels he's too immature. The next book in this series is Girls Under Pressure, which is a lot more problematic, and honestly, out of all of Jacqueline Wilson's books, it probably hasn't aged the best. If you have ever had issues with body image or eating disorders or anything like that, I would really suggest you just skip onwards in the video. The book starts with the three girls Christmas shopping, and they end up running into these modelling tryouts, and Ellie is absolutely horrified, even more so when Nadine and Magda actually want to take part. And there's a girl who sees Ellie in the queue and questions why she's even taking part and calls her fat, which sends Ellie into an absolute spiral. Something to bear in mind is this book came out in 1998 when diet culture and all of those fads were, at the height of the media. So that probably explains why a lot of this book is the way it is. Ellie starts calorie counting, heavily restricting what she eats, and when she does cave and eat, she ends up actually throwing up the food. And this behaviour only gets worse when Nadine is actually selected to go through to the next round of the competition. Ellie starts going to the local pool to swim every morning, and Magda ends up going with her because there's a boy she fancies, Mick, who she knows uses the gym at the same facility, And Ellie ends up befriending a student in the year above them called Zoe, who she starts using as inspiration of sorts. Ellie had recognised Zoe from school and acknowledges that she used to be quite chubby, but swimming must really work because she's really slimmed down. However, later on in the changing rooms, Ellie gets to see how thin Zoe actually is, and it's obvious she's very severely sick with an eating disorder. Magda does end up going on a date with Mick eventually, and he ends up trying to sexually assault her. But then we get an absolutely glorious scene of Ellie confronting Mick at the gym and slapping him. Nadine ends up not progressing past the next heat in the competition, and Ellie finds out Dan has actually been seeing someone else and their relationship ends. On Christmas Day, Ellie's stepmother catches her forcing herself to throw up, and the whole family becomes involved and catch on to what she's been doing. Zoe actually collapses with heart failure and is sent to hospital where she is revealed to have very, very extreme anorexia. And when Ellie goes to visit her, it kind of snaps her out of her own eating disordered behavior. And by the end of the novel, she decides she wants to focus on being happy rather than pursuing a certain body image. This is a nice sentiment and all, but obviously it's not very realistic. This book actually put a lot of unhealthy ideas about food in my head when I first read it, and it did for pretty much everyone I know who's actually read it as well. Ellie seeming to just get better when she sees Zoe without any form of counselling or recovery just isn't realistic. Like I said, this book was written in the late 90s, and obviously standards were very different back then. I'm not 100% sure what they were, but yeah, I think out of all of Jacqueline Wilson's novels, this one genuinely has not aged the best. Girls Out Late is much lighter in tone, but I said we might as well throw it in as we're discussing the rest of the series, and this book mainly focuses on Ellie's new boyfriend Russell, who is a dick! Liam makes a reappearance dating year 8 at the girls' school, but Nadine is able to pull her aside and get through to her. During the climax of the novel, the girls are actually kidnapped by a bunch of guys pretending that they are in a band. But the girls do manage to escape from the apartment building unharmed. Girls in Tears is the last novel in the series, and the title is very apt because it's very gloomy and very sad. Nadine has a new boyfriend, but it is over the internet, and Stranger Danger, this book came out in 2002, and doing that kind of thing was still considered, not a great idea. He tells her he's 19, and the two had met on a fan forum for a comic they both enjoy. Ellie and Russell are unfortunately still dating, and she has started putting him over Magda and Nadine constantly, which is causing a rift in the friend group. It's already kind of implied from Girls Out Late that Magda and Nadine don't really like Russell, and this is making everything worse. He's also putting a lot of pressure on Ellie to have sex and do other things in general she doesn't want to do behind the scenes. They're also both artists, and in this book, he flat out steals her artwork. Russell eventually brings Ellie to a house party to meet his friends, and she invites Magda and Nadine. Russell is being an absolute misogynistic dickhead to Ellie all night and really rude to her. Naturally, this really annoys Ellie, and she has never gotten drunk properly before, but she ends up getting absolutely hammered, and by the time Nadine and Magda show up, she's just wasted. In a heart-wrenching section that is actually really well written by Jacqueline Wilson, Ellie ends up stumbling onto Magda and Russell making out later that night. And this part is just so gutting. Like, you genuinely feel so awful for Ellie. And I remember the first time I read it, it was just so unexpected. Magda starts calling to Ellie's house, like, every day following the party and trying to blame the whole thing on her hamster dying, which it's like, okay, girl. I've seen a lot of arguments online that Nadine and Magda are just terrible, terrible friends to Ellie throughout the whole series, and to be honest, I don't notice it too much. But in Girls in Tears, they are just horrible to Ellie. Everybody is. Like, there's another point in the story where Nadine calls Ellie fat despite everything that happened in Girls Under Pressure. And Nadine proves herself to be a shitty friend again when, for some reason, she takes Magda's side in the Russell cheating situation. Magda does eventually convince Ellie to talk to her when she reveals Nadine is actually going to be meeting up with her internet boyfriend, and she wants to put a stop to it in case anything bad goes wrong and begs Ellie to come with her. Ellie and Magda end up going to the location where Nadine and her boyfriend agreed to meet, which was supposed to be a cinema, but when they get there they find it's a rundown porn theatre. When Nadine does show up, there is a dirty, creepy, significantly older man who starts talking to her, and Ellie and Magda run out to try and save her, and It is revealed that that guy was the online boyfriend, and they get Nadine away from him and manage to get her home. The novel ends with the three girls reuniting as friends again, and with Ellie getting back with Russell, which absolutely sucks. I wanted to put Girls in Tears on this list specifically just because of the internet boyfriend storyline. Obviously, it's quite icky. Nadine is 14 and she is showing Ellie messages she exchanged with this guy that are heavily implied to be inappropriate. So yeah, it's just a bit icky. Something that actually did inspire me to make this video is Jacqueline Wilson announced earlier this year there was actually going to be a 5th installment to the Girls series coming out this year, where they are all adults and Ellie is a single mum, and I'm just really excited for it because the Girls series are some of my favorite books by her as well, and I'm very, very curious to see what's going to happen. I'm so happy Ellie isn't still with Russell, but I'm wondering if her child is Russell's because I could easily see her like wasting her 20s on him. But yeah, something I'm very excited for. Forget what I said about Girls Under Pressure being the Jacqueline Wilson book that has aged the most terribly, because Love Lessons is actually the whole reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. Love Lessons revolves around a 14-year-old named Prue who lives with her parents and her sister Grace above her dad's bookshop, and she and her sister are homeschooled by their dad, who is very temperamental. They are also really sheltered. They don't even own a TV, and they don't have communication with anybody outside of the immediate family, really. Their dad is very verbally and emotionally abusive, and we're back at the body shaming again as he is really rude to Prue's sister Grace for being chubby. Like pretty much all Jacqueline Wilson protagonists, Prue is really bad at maths and has to go to extra classes for it, and her father gives her tuition money for each of these classes. Prue ends up not going to these classes and ends up taking advantage of the time to try and exercise a bit of freedom, and she goes shopping, she goes to fast food restaurants, and she buys herself things. One of the things she ends up buying herself is fancy lingerie. Bear in mind how sheltered she is. She thinks this is the kind of underwear normal women wear every day. Her dad finds out she's been skipping the classes, demands to know what she has done with the money, and when he sees the underwear, he actually ends up having a stroke. He spends the rest of the book pretty much in a hospital, and as he can't homeschool the girls anymore, they start going to the only local secondary school that has space, which is Woolworth, and it's quite a rough school. The girls come to the school where they are greeted by Mr. Raxbury, the art teacher, who is described as being very gentle and handsome, and that makes me want to throw up, and you'll find out why in a few minutes. Both girls have to take aptitude tests. Grace ends up scoring really well, and Prue actually ends up doing quite badly and is placed in a remedial class. Prue is an easy target for bullies and pretty much gets harassed instantly. She even gets harassed by some of her teachers, such as the English teacher. When getting changed for PE, it's revealed she wore that lingerie set she showed her dad under her clothes, and this absolutely just ruins her social status at the school. In her IT class, she doesn't even know how to turn the computer on, and her teacher actually thinks she's taking the piss. She gets quite jealous of Grace when Grace has a really easy time fitting in and makes quite a few friends. Prue has only 2 students in the class who are any bit kind to her: Sarah, who has special needs, and Toby, who has a very obvious crush on her and honestly badgers her over it. Like, parts of it are quite uncomfortable to read. Toby also has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend and her friends end up harassing Prue as expected. The only bit of solace Prue finds in the school is during Rax's art classes, and the two end up becoming quite close. He really admires her art, and they end up speaking quite frequently outside of class and developing somewhat of a friendship. And eventually he asks if she'd be willing to start babysitting his kids at his home. At this point in the novel, it is established that Prue has a massive crush on him. She starts babysitting his toddlers Harry and Lily, and she's quite irritated to realise Rax's wife Marion is actually a really lovely person who she gets on really well with, though Marion is quite snappy with Rax, which Prue doesn't like. Whenever Prue has the kids put down to bed, she again exercises some freedom and starts using whatever items in the house that she pleases, and there is no trace of this by the time the couple get home ever. Prue becomes quite brazen with her crush on Rax, and they have one-on-one time in the car each night when he drives her back to the bookshop after babysitting, and she loves this time as it's the only real proper conversational time they get to have together without anyone else around, and one night she ends up blowing him a kiss as he drives off. She starts wearing raunchier outfits to the Raxbury household, using her paints as makeup as she doesn't own any makeup, she's not allowed to, and one day Marion is like, hey, let me make you up. Rax walks in and kind of stares at what the two are doing and tells Marion that Prue actually won't be able to babysit anymore because it's interfering with her schoolwork, and Prue, confused, denies this, and Rax gets irritated and storms out. When Rax is giving Prue a lift home that night, he confronts her on how inappropriate her behaviour has been towards him lately. In an ideal world, Rax would explain to her why this is wrong and inappropriate and put some distance between the two of them. But I don't know why this novel exists. This man clearly has no willpower because Prue ends up confessing her feelings and forcing a confession out of him, and the two end up having a makeout session in his car. This 14-year-old student of his. It's implied during another point in the novel that if Rax had met Prue first and she was the same age as him and Marion, he definitely would have chosen her. And he also tells Prue at a different point that he is willing to leave his wife and family for her, and they can run away together. I don't think Rax's age is ever specified, but he's implied to kind of be in his mid to late 20s, I think, and even at that, it doesn't fucking matter. He's an adult and her teacher either way. Anyways, Prue continues going to school, pretending everything is normal, and continues visiting her dad in the hospital. Eventually, her dad is permitted to come home, though he is still heavily suffering the side effects of the stroke, and he's absolutely infuriated when he learns that Prue and Grace have been enrolled in public school and are going, and he demands that they have to stop. Prue and Grace come into school this morning upset, and Prue goes straight to Rax for comfort, and he holds her in the classroom and she tells him that she loves him, and Sarah walks in and the two spring apart, believing that she has seen nothing. In English class later that day, the class are studying Romeo and Juliet, and the teacher tasks the class with coming up with other iconic couples, whether they are fictional or real. Sarah ends up innocently chiming in with Prue and Rax, and Prue at first thinks nobody heard her and puts her head down, but eventually the whole class goes quiet and takes notice of what Sarah said, including the teacher, and shit absolutely hits the fan. Rax is interviewed, Prue is interviewed, Sarah is interviewed. When she is interviewed, Prue takes all of the blame and is very upset to learn that Rax has also placed all of the blame on her when he was interviewed, but she doesn't change her story. Prue is so different from any other character Jacqueline Wilson has written. She is a lot more flawed and a lot more nuanced, and Miss Wilmot, the head teacher, actually ends up calling her out on her blatant arrogance and just unwillingness to even try to fit in throughout the interview. But considering the time that she brought it up, and considering how everybody is just pointing fingers at Prue for the situation, it just entirely comes across as victim blaming. In fact, it doesn't come across as, it's exactly what it is. At the end of this school day, Prue, in a very easy decision for administration, it would seem, is just expelled. By the end of the school day, it's kind of reached every student in the school, at least some variation of what's gone on, and Grace questions Prue endlessly about what's happened when they're on the walk home from school. What may be the most endlessly questionable decision ever, Rax ends up pulling up beside Prue and Grace and asking Prue to get into the car with him. They then drive off to somewhere private and have an emotional goodbye as, surprise, surprise, Rax tells Prue he cannot leave his family. This man does not deserve his family. He deserves jail. This kind of works out for the best for Prue because she ends up getting accepted to a private comprehensive school in the town. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's based on her art skills. And she stays in touch with Toby, the boy in her class who had a crush on her. Rax remains a teacher at Wentworth with absolutely no consequences whatsoever, which is incredibly frustrating. And at the end of the novel, Prue reveals that she is in fact still in love with him and hasn't moved on feelings-wise at all, which is also very disappointing. Again, I'm not sure when this book came out. I think it was the early 2000s, so it was definitely a different time, but it might have been nice to see her, like, maybe report him to police, or at the very least realize the way he had behaved towards her was wrong. I don't think I need to explain to any of you why I left this one for last, right? Like, this is definitely her most icky novel. I meant what I said at the start of the video. I don't mean this video to be in any way disrespectful towards Jacqueline Wilson, and I think despite the heavy subject matter of most of her books, most of them do have, you know, a very real message behind them. But even Girls Under Pressure had a very real message behind it, but with this one, I just really think it could have been handled better. The teacher not only reciprocating her feelings and engaging with her physically, but the whole victim blaming circus that goes on at the end of the novel and the fact that Rax gets away with everything scot-free, it's really hard to stomach, especially reading it back as an adult. This book could have been a really good opportunity to teach young girls about the dangers of crushes like this being reciprocated. Obviously, these crushes are going to happen when you're a teenager, that is just life. But actually, to return to Girls Out Late for a minute, there is a subplot involving Magda where she develops a crush on their male art teacher as well. And he ends up explaining to her why that can never happen. And while it's embarrassing for Magda, I think it's handled significantly better than it is in this book. There's a Reddit thread I found while researching this video that considers Wilson to be pointing out the more fundamental issues within how less academic matters are handled within schools through the eyes of an unreliable narrator. I'll throw a link in the description for anyone who may be interested. While this is a great theory and everything, the Redditor themselves points out that because this is a book for younger readers, they're probably not going to be thinking about the subject matter that critically. The book is beautifully written, and I wouldn't say that I would never reread it again, but I remember being gutted that Prue and Rax didn't run away together when reading this as a child. And reading it again as an adult, you definitely feel a different kind of resentment at the end of the book. I doubt I was the only one hoping that Prue and Rax were going to be endgame as well, reading it as a child, and while I did find the story pretty scandalous, it's worrying to think how many of us may have read it and interpreted it differently. To point out a positive to this novel, Wilson really does write teenagers brilliantly, and the melodrama of the characters is really well done. So that concludes this list. I hope you enjoyed. If you read Jacqueline Wilson books as a child, let me know your favourite, or alternatively let me know which one scarred you for life. If you were a fan of the Girls series growing up like I was, are you excited for the new book? What do you think might happen in it? There are a couple of honourable mentions I thought of when making this video, so I might have to make a part 2 at some point. Actually, I was telling my friends about this video, and one of them was like, oh my god, remember the illustrated mum? Like, wasn't that messed up? And I actually never read it as a child, but I've started reading it since the script for this video was completed, and so far, yeah, it's intense. If you enjoyed, please feel free to subscribe. I usually make videos about true crime and music, but this was really fun. Take care.